This is Gregory Shelton from Historic Living Modern World. Today we're in Delaware City, Delaware, at the home of Fort Delaware, one of the coolest historical sites around. Cannot wait to show you how great it is. My journey begins with a half-mile ferry ride from Delaware City to Peapatch Island, the home of Fort Delaware. I'm very excited to meet Jake Miller for a private tour of one of the nation's most amazing pieces of history. Jake, how you doing, man?
Hey, Greg. How are you?
I'm doing very well.
Good to see you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Can't wait to see what you have in store for us.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So this is Fort Delaware State Park. This is the most significant Civil War site in Delaware.
Wow.
It was built in 1859 to protect the river passage out here on the Delaware River up to Philadelphia. And for 60 years, 80 years, it served as the defender of Philadelphia and also as a prisoner of war facility for captured Confederate soldiers during the Civil War.
Can we check it out?
Yeah, let's go in.
Let's do it. Check it out.
All right, so here we are. We're in the parade ground for Fort Delaware at this point. So this area would have been a big open area where soldiers would have gathered. You had a garrison here of between 400 and 1,200 soldiers. So at the end of the month, you line up, everyone has inspection, everyone has to open knapsacks and all that stuff, and everything gets checked. The other thing that you got going on constantly is you have 156 guns, cannons, big heavy artillery pieces surrounding us. And there's 4 hours of drill for every soldier at Fort Delaware going on daily on these cannons.
Wow, so that's what would be happening if we're talking when what this was built for.
Right, exactly, yes. Every place, if you look around, you see all these arches everywhere. Those are called casemates, and they're the basic building blocks of a fort like this. Same type of thing as Fort Sumter, Fort Pulaski, Fort Jefferson down in the Key West. Each one of those would have had a cannon prepared to defend the Delaware River. And these things range from a 32-pounder, which fired a 32-pound solid ball of iron, up to a 10-inch Columbiad that fired a 128-pound solid shot at a range of 3 miles. So imagine you're on a ship out there trying to get to Philadelphia to set fire to everything.
Right.
And from 3 miles away, they can start lobbing 128-pound balls of iron at you.
And any ship of that,
and you're going like this. It's not going to be a good day for you to be in the
So
Navy.
I'm assuming that would set them off course. It could strike them, but that ball is so big and so heavy, it's going to do damage to any ship at that time.
Yeah, yes, except for perhaps the ironclads. So this is one of the things that comes out of the Civil War is you get these ironclad vessels that all of a sudden are a little bit more impervious to that stuff.
Gotcha.
And that is why the fort has to actually update. So 30 years after the Civil War, you get this area that's behind us here, this concrete section is added in the 1890s in an attempt to upgrade the fort. So up on top of that section, you had 3 long-range cannons that are 12-inch guns. These ones are breech loaders, so they load from the back, and they can fire a 1,000-pound projectile now, up to 8.5 miles.
Wow.
And those can go through just about anything.
And so Fort Delaware, its heyday obviously was built to protect Philadelphia, Delaware in the Civil War time frame.
Yes.
But it's such a substantial place that, like you said, they need to modernize it because it's here to stay, right? We're talking blocks and stone and granite and steel. So it's an entity in itself, right?
Yes.
So it has to be updated, and this is a body of water, I would assume, that's always being traveled.
Oh yeah.
And if there's a chance to hold it down and protect it, they're going to do it.
Yes. Yep.
Very cool. Yep. So I see a lot of things, cannonballs, I'm sure, are for display. Would they be trying to make them here?
So that's a great question. They're not so much manufacturing that stuff here.
Okay.
All of that, the projectiles, the powder rounds, the bullets, all of that stuff is manufactured in an arsenal, which would be up towards Philadelphia, either the Frankfurt or the Schuylkill arsenals in Philadelphia.
Gotcha. So not too far away, but enough to be shipped.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
You have access to water, right? So if they were delivered there, it's a perfect scenario, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Wonderful. Absolutely. So when we look at a beautiful sunny day like we have today, if I was captured and if I was a Confederate soldier, what would I be going through right now?
while we're standing here?
Yeah, okay, so that's a great question. So there were about 33,000 prisoners that came through Fort Delaware during the 4 years of the Civil War. 33,000. So these guys are being brought here. They're going to be searched. So any contraband items that they've brought in with them, whether that's some kind of a weapon somehow or something that's got a U.S. stamp on it that they took from somebody else on the battlefield, those are all being confiscated. And they're going to be taken to housing, which is actually outside the fort. There was a complex built outside the fort for about 10,000 prisoners, and they'd be staying out there for the most part, many of them, for the rest of the war. In generally crowded conditions without great sanitation, but in conditions that in many cases were also much better than they would have had, at least late in the war, in their own lines down in Virginia.
So Jake, what did it feel like to be a prisoner at Fort Delaware back in the Civil War timeframe?
So that's a great question. We obviously don't know really what it felt like.
Sure.
But Fort Delaware was, if you had to be a prisoner anywhere, Fort Delaware was not a bad place to be by the standards of the time. It's overcrowded for a lot of the war. Sanitation's not great, but you have shelter, so you're actually in a building.
Okay.
You have food. You're getting about 2 meals a day.
Wow.
Which are of similar quality, although not quite the same quantity as the guys that are stationed here for the Union.
Okay.
And you have access to a hospital, a pretty decent hospital that's built on the north end of the island.
Gotcha.
So all in all, if you had to pick a spot to be at in the Civil War, this is not a bad choice.
Gotcha. So when we talk about the hospital, that's something they're required to build, or is that something they felt that this place needed, or is that just something that they felt that their troops, the Union troops, would need them also?
Yeah, it was kind of a combination. They felt like the site needed it. You got to understand that Pea Patch Island, which is the place that we're standing on right now, was the second largest city in Delaware in 1863. It was bigger than any other city other than Wilmington. So with that many people, both Union soldiers, Confederate prisoners, civilians, you need a hospital. You need some place that you can send people that are sick and ill. So they built a hospital. It was about 550 beds, which isn't enough if you got 7,000 prisoners, but it's the best you can do. So.
Gotcha. So when we talk about people getting shot, possibly getting injured, that for the reasons why they're here, how many people died during this time frame?
So according to the records that we have, about 2,460 prisoners passed away while they were here on the island. Now, if you look at the total number of prisoners that came through, that's a death rate of about 7.45%. If you compare that to some of the other sites like Andersonville, Elmira, those numbers are up in the high 20s, mid to high 20s. In that regard, this was a lot different, a lot less of a death rate than those.
How would you attribute those numbers? Is it just because there was a facility to take care of them, or Delawareans did it better than?
Yeah, I think there's probably a number of factors. Fort Delaware is a very different type of prison. It's built at a different time. Fort Delaware is built starts taking prisoners in 1862. Some of the ones that are really bad don't really open until 1864, when there's so many prisoners, they just need a place to put them. Fort Delaware, like I said, you had shelter, you had a hospital, but you also had a population, a civilian population out there that generally was somewhat interested in actually helping these guys out with charity, and was able to do that. So that probably contributes as well.
Jake, there's so much beautiful artillery. Can we see one of the cannons?
Oh yeah, I'd love to show you one.
Cool, Let's go check it out.
Let's do it. All right, so behind us here we have a 32-pounder Seacoast gun. This is one of 4 original guns at Fort Delaware. Now, this gun was around during the Civil War. It's from 1851. Wasn't here at Fort Delaware, but it is the same type we had. Believe it or not, this is one of the little guys.
Wow.
This is a 32-pounder Seacoast gun, which means it fired a 32-pound solid shot, had a range of about a mile, which would get you all the way to the New Jersey shore from this side of the fort. It takes a crew of 5 to load. So it's 5 men all working together with very, very choreographed steps to be able to get the projectile, or the cannonball, and the powder into the muzzle.
Okay.
and actually aim the piece. So you have to roll this whole carriage forward so it's out the window.
So the gun end will go out so it wouldn't hit in here. So
yes, absolutely, right, yeah. And there was a system designed up at the window, that window we call an embrasure, where there was a set of doors that while you're loading it, the iron doors are closed. You roll the gun out and the window's open. And then when the gun fires and recoils, it actually shuts the iron doors. So you're relatively safe while you load.
So this is so this is connected to the door.
Yes.
So, right. So once it fired, right. Interesting.
Yep.
Wow. What an amazing design.
Yes. And the crews here practiced for about 4 hours a day to be able to load quickly and efficiently. And a good crew could do the whole process of loading and firing this cannon about once a minute.
Gotcha. So I know in some of the history that I've read, there wasn't really a lot of shots coming from this battlefront. But what would we likely to see out there? Would it just be ships that would be coming to take things south, or what would they be shooting at ultimately?
So the idea is that you're shooting at enemy ships as they sail up to Philadelphia. So you're protecting Philadelphia. So if you've got, let's say, the British, for example, in 1850 when this is built, the British is who we're afraid of. The British want to sail their navy up into Philadelphia. Well, here you go. Now you've got the fort, 156 cannons that they have to get past if they're going to get up there and do that.
Wow. Wow. So this was brought here because it's the same exact kind of gun. Is it the cannon part that's original, or is the whole kit and caboodle?
So the cannon itself, the barrel, is original. The carriage has been rebuilt.
Okay.
But one of the things that you see is a lot of the metal parts were actually found on the island.
Oh, wow.
So they're for a carriage like this. You can see even here that the elevation screw, 2 of these prongs are real chewed up. These are original. And then they rebuilt, they remanufactured the whole rest of it to fit.
Wow. So obviously we see a little interesting tram here, which allows it to spin accordingly. How would that work when it needs to go to the end to connect to the doors?
Great question. So you're gonna have what's called a brake. One of the members of the crew is gonna stick this in the back of the gun and push down. Now the weight is on the carriage, so you can actually roll the thing forward out the window.
So it goes right down with gravity, right?
The other thing that you've got is you have to aim side to side. So maneuvering spike is what this is called. You wedge this under the carriage. Now you've got about 30 degrees to be able to arc this and aim at whatever you're shooting at.
Gotcha. That's a lot of work with the weight and that kind of thing.
Yes, and again, 1 minute between shots.
And from a shooting perspective, who's the person making the decisions when they say, hey, go left, go right, go forward? Who is that person?
So you had a crew member called the gunner. He's here on the back of the gun, and he's responsible for actually doing the aiming. So he's got to know how long is that shot going to take to get where it needs to go? How much do we need to lead the ship? All of those types of things. He's got to be responsible for all that.
Wow. Very, very, very interesting.
All right, so we're standing now on the ramparts at the top of Fort Delaware. This is the north end of the fort. So I'm looking off towards New Jersey that way, which is about a mile away. Generally speaking, most of your guns are going to be on the south side because that's the area that you expect your attacks to come from. So you want to have somebody up here keeping an eye out for enemy ships that are coming up the river because you want to be able to start firing at them as quickly as possible. So if somebody sees an enemy ship or identifies something that you need to be shooting at, they're going to beat to quarters, is what it's called. So you're going to get a drummer that's going to give the correct dun 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 dun, and everyone's going to then run to their established gun positions and just start going right in because you practice this all the time, right? So you're just going to do it by memory, and you're going to fire as many shots as it takes to stop that enemy.
And that's all guns blazing.
Yeah, so not all the guns in the fort.
Sure.
You're not firing all the guns in the fort, but you're firing each battery that's here. So there's meant to be 4 batteries at Fort Delaware. Each one of them is responsible for a section of guns. So you're going to fire those sections. Now, if the ships get by you, you might shift to a different set where you can get a better line on them.
Okay.
But you're firing sort of sections at a time.
Gotcha. And luckily, they didn't have any shots. There was no defensing needed to be taken.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about Fort Delaware. Like many of these forts, never fired really a shot in combat. The closest that Fort Delaware ever came was they had a civilian craft that had some copperheads or suspected Confederate loyalists or sympathizers on board. And the authorities wanted to arrest this ship. So as it's going by the fort, the soldiers at the fort actually fire like a shot across the bow.
Okay.
And of course, if you're the civilian ship, you're gonna stop, right? So they stop, they get arrested, they come here, they prove their loyalty pretty much right away, and they're on their way.
Jake, I had a wonderful time today. Thank you very much for the tour, man.
Oh yeah, it was great
you.
to meet you. Thanks for coming out.
So if I want to learn more about Fort Delaware, where do we go?
Great question. There's a couple things you can do. You can check us out on our website, destateparks.com. You can check us out on Facebook, Fort Delaware State Park. We're real easy to find. And you can come out and visit us again. We're open 5 days a week, Wednesday through Sunday, through Labor Day. So love to see you out here once more.
I can't wait for my next trip. Thanks, man.
Great.
Appreciate it.
Have a great day.
Thank you. I got to tell you, I had a wonderful time today. Wonderful folks, a wonderful tour. This place is an amazing gem of Delaware, and I recommend you come see it. If you like what you've seen today, make sure you click like and subscribe. Make sure you follow us on Facebook and Instagram. This is Gregory Shelton with Historic Living Modern World, reminding you, whenever you do something, always work to move people. Cheers.